Good morning and welcome to this morning's Climate Change and Sustainability Committee. I would like to just introduce the top table to start with, please. On my far left, we have Councillor Liz Barrett, Vice Convener. Next to Liz, we have Barbara Renton, Executive Director of Communities, and Adam Taylor from Committee Services. I'm also delighted this morning to say we're delighted by and delighted that we're joined by one representative from the Climate Change Commission, who are non-elected member appointed to this committee, and that's Richard Oram. Nathan Jameson may be joining online, but I'm not sure if he's here yet. I will now ask Adam to confirm any apologies received and take a roll call of members in attendance. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So we've got apologies this morning from Councillor Cuthbert with Bailey Brock substituting. All members are actually present in the chambers with the exception of two, so I'll just ask the two online to confirm whether they can hear us. Bailey Brock?
Yes, I can hear you.
Jeez. And Councillor Kugali?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. All members are present. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Adam. Can I just remind councillors, please use the chat function to attract my attention. Can I ask if there's any declarations of interest for any of the items on the agenda? No. Before we start, I'd like to give, and I will be brief here as we do have a full agenda. Given the latest news that the Council has been awarded a CDP accreditation of an A, going from a D 2 years ago, last year in a B, and this year being one of 119 municipalities worldwide to meet the strict requirement in addressing the climate and biodiversity emergencies. Clearly highlighting this administration and this council's ambition in building a sustainable place for future generations. I would like to recognise the important and crucial role our officers have played in achieving this, especially in the council's climate change team and throughout the whole council, who have shown a great commitment, innovation and hard work in building a comprehensive strategy and action plan, and also in the numerous actions and projects that the Council have already undertaken and are currently undertaken to address the challenges we face in dealing with the climate emergency. One such action that clearly demonstrates this Council's ambition has also received a prestigious award, with the Riverside Primary School getting an award for innovation in delivering sustainable learning place at the Learning Places Scotland's awards ceremony recently, with the Riverside Primary School being the first environmentally friendly passive house primary school in Scotland and building a first-class learning environment for future generations. Finally, I would like to thank our climate change team and education officers for hosting another exceptional youth climate conference. The attendance engagement from young people was inspiring, with the panellists fielding some challenging questions from Perth and Kinross pupils, showing how young people understand the challenges we face going forward. Following on for that, can I just ask if we can agree our minutes from the last meeting on the 23rd of August? Agreed, thank you. To move to item 4 on the paper, statutory biodiversity duty report on delivery January 21 to December 23. Can I ask Joanna Dick to introduce this report?
Good morning. The Council has a statutory duty to protect and enhance biodiversity when carrying out all of our functions. All public bodies must report to the Scottish Government every 3 years on how we have done this and how we've complied with our duty. This report covers the period from the 1st of January 2021 until the end of this year. It demonstrates how Perth and Kinross Council have performed regarding the biodiversity duty. The report includes actions undertaken by the Council to protect and enhance biodiversity, to mainstream nature-based solutions, climate change and biodiversity throughout the organisation, engage with the public and develop our workforce, conduct and commission research, and draw attention to the main achievements for biodiversity that we've done over the last 3 years. It's also an opportunity to look ahead to potential challenges. The report shows there has been significant positive actions taken by the Council directly and by communities with support from the Council. These have led to positive progress in addressing the biodiversity emergency across Perth and Kinross. The Council has achieved much for biodiversity over the last 3 years, with enhanced mainstreaming and prioritisation of climate change and reducing biodiversity loss. We're very grateful to the financial support received from the Scottish Government and to the vast contributions made by our local communities and volunteers right across Perth and Kinross. The Council recognises there is still a lot to achieve within a minimal resource environment, but we plan to map the resources required, working collaboratively with our communities and other partners to deliver biodiversity protection and enhancement in the most efficient manner for the next reporting period, which will be in 3 years' time. So I ask that the recommendations to note the significant positive work undertaken over the period of the 3 years and to approve the biodiversity duty report to be uploaded to the Perth and Kinross Council website and sent to the Scottish Government are approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. Questions, Councillor Forbes first.
Thanks, Convener. Got quite a few questions on this report, but I'll give everyone else a shot. My first question, Joanna, is quite a general question, and I know we have this duty to report to the Scottish Government. Do we get any kind of feedback from them? I mean, my fear here is that you and your team spend however many hours, weeks writing this stuff. It goes to the Scottish Government, they pay civil servants to read it, and then it sort of just falls by the wayside. Do we get interaction back and forward and some kind of feedback from them?
We haven't previously, but what they have done is done research. So they take all of the duty reports from local authorities and they do analysis and they do pick out good practice. And Perth and Kinross Council are highlighted on their website as being good practice for having our biodiversity ambassadors group, which is internal staff colleagues. But no, we don't receive feedback, but they do go through it and pull out good practice. And I think this time they have asked for more information on what the barriers are and resource requirements are. So I think they're looking for more information on that this time.
Councillor Kugali online.
Hi. Just looking at page 22, I appreciate those numbers of total planning applications only run to October. But just wondering whether that is something that we're expecting to be lower again, and whether we know anything about the reason for that drop off. I appreciate that may be better directed at another officer, but that is quite an interesting one that is dropping, and I was just wondering whether we know why.
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons. One is a change in how the numbers are being recorded by the development management team in the system. And then the second reason is that we've done quite a bit of work to support planning officers to give, we've done do sessions, training sessions, we've created kind of checklists and different guidance. So the hope going forward is that planning would consult biodiversity a bit less, because they would be more confident to put our planning for nature guidance recommendations in themselves, and so that they would only be coming to biodiversity if they were, say, major applications or if they were quite complex and they needed additional support.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Councillor Anderson.
Just on page 40 of the paper we've got in front of us. I just wanted top line, Perth and Kinross Climate Commission, and next line is climate change. Has it lost its change, or is that just a mistake? Clerical, possibly.
Sorry, Councillor Anderson, do you mean that the top paragraph is about the Climate Change Commission, and the paragraph underneath is about the climate change working groups?
Covering the working group and heading. I just wonder, who are the members of this body? How many members are there, and who are the members of this body? I see one is present. I was informed to start the proceedings, but how many do we have, and who are they in the background?
Did you want to give an update, Barbara, on the Commission?
I'll start, and maybe Richard, who's the chair of the Climate Commission, might want to come in. So the Council approved the setting up of a Climate Commission 2 years ago. And since then, we've worked very hard to establish that. At the moment, sort of out with the non-council members, then there are a number of people who sought the position. We did a very thorough check in terms of their eligibility. The council took a decision that approximately 25% of the Climate Commission would be made up of young people. But sort of and work has been ongoing with the Climate Commission for sort of the 18 months since it's been established. So it is something that the council approved. Councillor Barrett, Councillor Waters and myself are members of the Climate Commission as well. But Richard, I don't know whether you want to come in.
Yeah, thanks, Barbara. Yeah, we're independent. We applied to an open advertisement by the council. We represent a broad constituency from right across the Perth and Kinross council area. As Barbara was outlining there, we've got youth membership, could include some of the more active members of the panel. We represent ourselves, even though we come from a variety of backgrounds, and we're there to liaise, provide additional guidance, feedback, be a critical friend, identify areas where perhaps more work can be done. We're still in the process of getting ourselves formally organised in terms of being able to become more visible through establishing our own web identity. So we are the Perth and Kinross Climate Change Commission. We are not Perth and Kinross Council. The PKC bit has a tendency to occasionally cause some confusion there, but that's who we are.
Thank you, Richard. I'll go to people with just their first question first. So, question for Councillor Welch.
This is a great report, and it's really promising to see the efforts to include biodiversity as part of the planning process. In terms of support and subsequent compliance once projects are completed, who carries out that compliance element in terms of an audit or a follow-up, just to ensure these measures are fully implemented? Thank you.
Joanne, are you able to answer that one?
So mainly the enforcement team. One thing we do want to do more of is going out and monitoring and make sure that actually, as you say, these conditions are being implemented correctly. And we've had a couple of instances where members of the public have gotten in touch with us. There was a case in Blairgowrie where wildlife curbs had not gone in. So I raised that with enforcement. They got in touch with the developer and the curbs are now in. But there isn't kind of a lot of monitoring of the biodiversity side of things. And it's something that we would like to do more of to make sure that these measures are actually implemented for wildlife to use.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes, your second question.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I was pleased to see that we've identified that Blairgowrie and Ratu were the first biodiversity town, but unless I'm mistaken, St Meadows and Glencarse were the first biodiversity villages, and I don't see any reference to them. Am I right in that? And is there a reason that they were excluded? And apologies for being a bit parochial about this.
You're correct, and I will add it in to that section. It should be there. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Kugali.
Hi. Yeah, there's obviously mention of the potential Tay Forest National Park, and I was wondering whether we know what the impact will be on planning applications that are still going through the process. if that at some point does come into being. So if there's a wind farm proposed in Strathern at the moment, say that isn't approved by the time we perchance get a national park, what will be the impact on those planning applications? Do they still have to follow the original rules or ones that come in afterwards?
Barbara's going to just answer this.
Barbara's going to dodge the question, I think. Thank you, Councillor Kigali. I think we would need to look into that at the moment. Sort of obviously we're just still consulting in terms of the national park before we submit any application, but we'll pick that up and come back to you.
Thank you, Barbara. Councillor Welch, your second question.
Sorry, Convener.
Oh, my apologies. That's under the same one for Welch's. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Convener. I was looking at page 22 in the table. We've had a 15% increase in the number of planning applications assessed for biodiversity constraints. I was wondering how that 15% increase has come about.
I think some of it is raised awareness within the team of biodiversity and the considerations that it needs to be. And I think it's partly MPF4 as well, that it brings an enhancement element to biodiversity that was not as clearly stipulated in the previous policy in MPF3. So I think it's a combination of both. And we've also had some new members of staff, and I think it's them just getting up to speed with our requirements and things like that as well. I think it's a combination of those three.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes, your third question.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Page 30 references the plant life and Tayside amphibians and reptile group, and it's in relation to verge management. Verge management is very divisive and potential to upset some people there. Can you just maybe expand a little bit on that, what the discussions are, and specifically, will this likely result in less verge cutting?
I'm afraid I can't offer much more information because it's our green space colleagues that have been dealing with that. I've been involved in a kind of advisory role in terms of the biodiversity benefits that we would get, but it's very much green space that are working with bug life and the community to look at grassland management. But yeah, absolutely, it is divisive, and I think we do have a document that I helped create that kind of sets out how we can communicate better with community. So I think going forward we need to really communicate what we're doing to communities and what benefits we hope to get from it. Yeah, I agree.
Do you want to come back?
I was just going to ask if we could maybe get some more detail on that after the meeting, if that's okay. Thank you.
It is on the agenda, and we are having a serious look at how we improve our communication and engagement with the communities. Councillor Kigali.
Yeah, just wondering whether we could get some more detail potentially on the green graveyards and how that affects, regular grass management, etc. I know that's something that's probably a point of concern for a lot of people that, go to graveyards every so often but aren't actually involved in their ongoing maintenance. So I just want to make sure that we're properly involving all of the community in making sure that when they go down to visit a graveyard, they're not shocked by the state of it. That might be beneficial for biodiversity, but not what they have in mind when they go to pay respect to a lost relative.
Certainly, I don't think if anything else to add to. Thanks.
Just to say that the Green Graveyard project, so that's a Tayside Biodiversity Partnership initiative that's in our local biodiversity action plan. And there's a list of things that you should do to make it a green graveyard, and grassland management's just one element of that. So I think we just need to be mindful that we're not creating green graveyards by just leaving the grass and never cutting it. There's other measures that need to be put in place so that it is acceptable to people, so that you have a mix of neat and tidy, but then you have rougher areas that are better for wildlife. So it's it's kind of getting that balance, and there is really good guidance out there about the Green Graveyard Initiative, and Catherine Lloyd can help with that as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
But we also have a Friends of Cemeteries approach as well. So we have a number of cemeteries where we work very closely with communities in terms of upkeep and ensuring that it is as respectful as we possibly can make it.
Thank you, Barbara. Councillor Forbes, you still one more? You still got a question?
I've actually got three.
Still got another three.
You want me just to go with them? They are as short and brief and straight to the point as I'd like to think I always am.
Yeah.
Actions to protect and enhance biodiversity references Perth and Kinross and Angus Council, but doesn't reference Dundee. And I wondered if Dundee were in with us on that or not.
So Dundee pulled back from the Tayside Biodiversity Partnership in terms of funding it. I can't remember how many years ago, I'd need to check, but quite a number of years. So we're working closely with Angus Council, but not as much with Dundee, though the document that was created about grassland management, I interviewed Dundee to see how they'd done it, and they learned a lot of lessons from the way that they did it. So we are in contact with them, but we're just working less closely because they're not in the wider partnership.
Thanks for that. I'll roll my last two into the same question. You reference wildlife curbs, and I think there's also somewhere in here about a wildlife ladder, if that's the right phrase. Can you just tell me what those are?
Yep, so wildlife curb prevents toads and frogs and things from going into the actual drain. So instead of having a normal straight curb, it has a indent into it. So the toads and frogs are going along following the curb, and instead of dropping directly into the drain, they go round the curve and then they can go on their way. And then for areas where we can or we haven't, we're not able to retrofit wildlife curbs, amphibian ladders go in the actual drain. So once the frogs and the toads hop along and they fall in, then they can use the ladder to climb out, because otherwise their chances of getting out is very, very slim. So yeah, I'll check. It should say amphibian ladder, so I'll double check that. Okay.
Thank you, Angus. Councillor Kigali on a question.
Yeah, towards the end of the report, there's mention of it being a problem that biodiversity records aren't centralised within Perth and Kinross. Is there anything we can actually do about that? Because it kind of just mentions that as a problem and moves on, but it does seem to be a fairly substantial one. Is there anything that we can do moving forward to rectify that?
Yeah, it is a significant barrier. It limits us quite a bit in Tayside that we don't have a local record centre. However, there is some good news around this because Scottish Government did a review of biological recording, and they've set up a project and they've employed project officers, and it's called the Better Biodiversity Data Project. And we're in close contact with them. We had a really great meeting with them a few months ago. And so they are looking at across Scotland, where do record centres operate? How do they operate? Can some amalgamate? Could some be expanded? So resources is an issue around that, but we're in a good place now because this project is actually looking at it, and we're looking at solutions to how we would be able to have a record centre in Tayside, which would be hugely valuable.
Do we have any timescales on that project? No.
Yeah, it's one of those where it's funded for, I think, is it 4 years? So they're moving quite quickly and they're making progress. They had a big conference last week in Edinburgh where they were pulling together lots of local authorities and discussing ways forward. So I can provide more information on that if that's useful.
Please, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. If there's any further questions, Councillor Welch.
Obviously, the climate group has an interest in flooding as well. You mentioned about the ladders that are going into gullies, and as you know, the council's making significant inroads and active in this area of gully cleaning. Is there some good joined up liaison in terms of supporting and training those that are cleaning gullies to ensure that any good work that's done with wildlife ladders is not undone, if you like? Thank you.
I think that's something that we still need to do and would be a good joined up thing to do. So not yet, but we will do in future.
I don't see any more questions here. I will move the report, and then Councillor Lane wants to come in for a comment, and Councillor Forbes also wants to come in for a comment. Jana, thanks very much for that. I think it's excellent work and important work going forward. This report seeks our approval of the biodiversity duty reporting for Perth and Kinross Council. We have a duty to further the conservation of biodiversity when carrying out our functions and reports on how we comply with this duty to the Scottish Government every 3 years. The submission of this report fulfills that duty. It is imperative that the contents of this report are taken into consideration as they illustrate the Council's performance in protecting and enhancing biodiversity, mainstreaming nature-based solutions throughout the organisation, and engaging with the public and developing our workforce. The report shows there has been significant positive actions taken both by the Council directly and by the communities with support from the Council. These have led to positive progress in addressing the biodiversity emergency across Perth and Kinross. Perth and Kinross has achieved much for biodiversity over the last 3 years, with enhanced mainstreaming and prioritisation of climate change and reducing biodiversity loss. There are many exciting opportunities and projects to explore, and the Council recognises there is still a lot to achieve within a minimal resource environment. We plan to map the resources required, working collaboratively with our communities and other partners to deliver biodiversity protection and enhancement in the most efficient manner for the next reporting period in 3 years. The Council has made significant progress to raise awareness of biodiversity and collaborate with our local communities, neighbouring local authorities and stakeholders to ensure that biodiversity is at the forefront of our work. We are grateful to the financial support received from the Scottish Government and the vast contributions made by local communities and volunteers across Perth and Kinross. We will continue to successfully work with our residents, businesses, communities and stakeholders to deliver our biodiversity duty. I am happy to accept the recommendations within the report and move the paper for approval. Can I ask Councillor Liz Barrett to second the report?
I second the report.
Can I go to Councillor Lane for a comment, please?
Thanks, Convener. This is one of the reports that I most enjoy reading that comes to any committee. The steps we're taking in biodiversity and encouraging it and being the voice for it should be commended. It's the automatic thinking of when something comes like a green graveyard that we're just leaving the grass to grow, which is completely a fallacy. A green graveyard, if one takes time to look at the Tayside biodiversity briefings we get. Last year I got 1,000 snowdrops to put in my local graveyard. I got a hoggallow, that's a hedgehog house. I got bat boxes to put up, and I also got bird boxes to put up. That's the biodiversity within a green graveyard, not just letting the grass grow unmanaged. And I'd advise all elected members to look at Tayside biodiversity literature and possibly take up the offer when they offer you free of charge to install any of these things within your own local graveyards. Also, it's amazing about the amphibian part of it and the ladders. And my daughter and I used to look at in 3 gully pots at Wester Essendon, and in 1 year we took out 120 mixed toads and frogs, as well as newts, which was amazing because you don't see them very often, and the odd vole or something that had fallen down. It's amazing the number of amphibian life that you can find in a gully pot. So anything that we can do to help and train, that we don't just go and immediately suck everything out of the gully pot without having a look down. Maybe all our operatives should have a little fishing net as well to lift out any amphibians that they find there. Great report, and I think it should be highlighted as much as we can and drive it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Councillor Forbes, a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Convener. There's quite a lot of talk in the report, which I agree with Councillor Ling on. I'm making a bit of a habit of agreeing with Councillor Ling. That's causing me some concern, I have to say. There's quite a lot of talk about community engagement in the report, and I'm sure all of us in the committee will remember the last meeting when we had a room full of people from Carsey. It was a very difficult and divisive meeting, and I think I would really just want to emphasise to the administration and to officers that when we make changes that do affect people, we need to take people with us. We can't just go out and do things as we did in Carsey. And I was chased around Tesco's the night after the meeting by somebody who lives in Carsey to thank me for supporting them. We saw the same thing in Errol just recently, where the council contractor arrived and started digging up the football pitch, and absolutely nobody knew anything about this, including the head of Green Space. So we need to really, really be careful about this. And specifically, I think we need to be careful about graveyards. And I take on board some of what Councillor Ling has just said, but I think it's reasonable for us and or for people, for Councillor Galley specifically, to raise this, because we can't expect members of the public to go and read biodiversity documents and understand what a green graveyard is. There is definitely an onus on us to understand it, but when members of the public see green graveyards, I think it's reasonable for them to expect that it will just be overgrown grass, and the duty is therefore on the council to pass that information on to them. And I spoke at the last meeting about putting signs up in areas where we're doing this to explain what we're doing and why we're doing it. I also think we need to be really careful when we talk about verges. That's another divisive issue, and I think we need to be really careful, and I'm sure Joanna will be taking that on board when she goes, moves this on and goes on to the next stage. And I just want to finish, Convener, by saying I am quite horrified that my fairly innocuous comment or question about the Scottish Government and asking what feedback we got to learn that we get none, but actually they've asked us for even more details this time. So it's good that they are giving us some money for this, but I think it would be really useful for people like Joanna and her team to spend hours and hours or weeks writing this kind of stuff to know that someone was reading it. And if we don't get any feedback, then I think that's pretty poor show. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you very much, Convener. I think the public are very aware that there's a climate emergency. I'm not sure, I think as Councillor Forbes has said, that the community is really aware that we have a biodiversity emergency that is just as severe and just as important to challenge. And I think a lot of what Councillor Forbes said regarding the public's understanding their ability to go away and read deeply into biodiversity isn't something they can do. And I do think it's something we need to do better as a council, that when we introduce things, that we provide information in a much more user-friendly and better way than we have in the past. I accept that we have a department who are really enthusiastic about getting on with the biodiversity challenge, but it is really, really important that we take the public with us at the same speed, and that actually going ahead of the public and them not understanding what we're doing is not where we want to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Welch.
Thank you, Convener. In the report, I did read that the council and council officers were looking to work with communities to develop a management plan, a biodiversity management plan. I typically can't find it now because I highlighted it in a different document. But I think that actually would go a significant way to ensuring that communication process is joined up, and ultimately interpretation materials are developed as partnership in that, so that ultimately those advocates of biodiversity and green spaces don't feel they're on the defensive, and they can really start to sort of properly support that message in communities. Because I think, broadly speaking, I don't know anybody that is against what we're trying to do here, but it's just this aspect of making sure it's communicated effectively. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard, you want to come in?
It's just a general comment I'd like to make to all councillors. It's one of the roles that the Climate Change Commission is aiming to develop, particularly this communication of how and what best practice might be. We're not there to browbeat and sort of push people in any particular direction, but what we would like to do is act as a conduit to help get best practice across, what best practice might actually represent, but also to hear what the local communities are saying in response to this, and act as a conduit in the other direction back to council and to the relevant areas within the council as to what local sentiment is, where support is needed, and what we can do to encourage the changes that we need to be making, all of us.
Thank you, Richard. Couldn't agree more. I think the clear message coming out of this is that that we are doing exceptionally good work on biodiversity. We are trying to address the emergency. We are as a council looking, at how we communicate the message of what we're doing and the no more policies, the policies in trying to protect amphibians in the drains and many other projects throughout the council, and it is something I think we will take full note of, and we will ensure that we try our best to communicate in a clear fashion so that the general public fully understand the importance of what we're trying to achieve and the way we're going about doing it. Thank you. Thank you very much, Joanna. I appreciate it. I'm going to pass over to Councillor Barrett for the next paper. Sorry, I need to get used to everybody till everybody agree the report, just a minor thing. Thank you. It's Adam's just here to keep me right. Thanks, Adam.
So this is the Public Bodies Climate Change Duties Report 2023 on carbon emissions, and I'd like to ask Irini Cortese to introduce the report, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and good morning. The report is part of our statutory Public Bodies Climate Change Duties. I would like to clarify the report itself is in the link to the appendix, as it was not possible to incorporate it into a narrative document due to it being an Excel spreadsheet. Last year, the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee requested officers to analyse the Council's Scope 3 emissions further in order to gain a better understanding of the Council's overall carbon footprint. This has been included in this year's report. Perth and Kinross Council's carbon footprint in 2022-23 has decreased year on year when considering the emission sources that have been reported to date. However, the inclusion of the additional Scope 3 data has resulted in an increase in reported Scope 3 emissions. As a result, the overall carbon footprint for 2022-23 seems to have increased in comparison to the previous reporting year. It is worth noting that it is difficult to establish an accurate year-on-year comparison due to the different data availability each year. Last, the reduction that has been reported in emissions reported to date is indeed very positive. However, our reductions in emissions will have to speed up significantly to meet the target set by Perth and Kinross Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Irini. Could I ask if members have questions on the report? I see Councillor Forbes and then Councillor Kigali. Thank you.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Page 62, section 4.7 talks about the staff travelling to work and working from home. And I wonder if factored into that is if people are working from home, it would be reasonable to expect them to put their heating on, and therefore their uses of CO2 would increase. Was that factored into this calculation?
Rini, can you answer that?
Yes, of course. Yes, so essentially the calculations for the overall figure in as a result of the survey included different factors, things like cars, types of engines, different sort of distances traveling to and from places of work and home working. So currently, the emissions factor associated with home working is significantly less than the emissions factor associated with traveling by car. And essentially, the results of the survey showed that a large percentage is traveling to and from work using their cars, hence the figure that has been provided in the report.
Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. I'm struggling to grasp this report. I didn't quite grasp your answer. So can we go back to that? So if I chose to not come in today and chose to work at home, it would be reasonable for me to assume I'd put the heating on. Was that factored in?
So to further clarify, the report is not saying that if people were to, or if staff were to work from home, that would significantly have lower emissions. The report is clearly showing the current carbon footprint of staff traveling to and from work. So given the current emissions factor of people working from home and people traveling in and from work, the emissions factor traveling to and from work is higher, and it's still quite sort of soon to look into an analysis where all staff would work from home, simply because we don't have that data. Similarly, to again fully answer your question, it would not be possible to calculate your emissions staying at home using or putting your heating on. We would need data, things like, are you on a green tariff? Do you have any renewable sort of measures put in place? So it is not it is not too sort of easy to give you a direct answer, simply because we do not have or hold that kind of data. It would be a much more complex analysis, if that makes sense.
I think Mr. Strenton would like to add something. Thank you. Councillor Kigali.
I suppose my question's on the same kind of line there. So just for clarity, this isn't measuring home working like it says. It's purely the travel, because we, like you said, it would be much more complicated to actually measure the carbon impact of home working. And the only reason I think this is especially interesting at the moment is a couple of weeks ago, I think it was York Council did a similar analysis, I believe, and discovered that it was much higher than they thought. So it's interesting that you're now saying it's much lower. And I'm just wondering whether this is something we need to do a proper deep dive into, because at the moment it says home working and it doesn't sound like we're actually measuring home working. We're purely saying we're not driving to work, and that's the only factor.
So we have used an emissions factor to take into consideration the staff that have said they are indeed working from home. So that emissions factor has been provided by the Scottish Government and is in line with the greenhouse gas protocol for sort of reporting greenhouse gases. Currently, that emissions factor is lower than transport car sort of emissions. And the results of the survey was that a much larger percentage is traveling to and from work, and a much smaller percentage is more based at home. Hence, the emissions are larger to travel to and from work. And when looking at the two emissions factors separately, yes, the home working factor is significantly less. And again, as I mentioned, this is provided by the Sustainable Scottish Network, as that's where we sort of report via to the Scottish government. So again, I know it's not a very direct answer, but it is the data availability we have to date, given the emissions factor we receive in order to report on.
Would it be possible for us to see the actual data here on the pie chart? Just I think that might help Councillor Forbes and I, especially his understanding of it. That I think the 0% there might be the thing that's getting flagged as something that's slightly confusing and maybe pointing us in the wrong direction.
Yeah, of course. So the actual report is provided within the appendix, so the link. So if you were to look at the emissions table on the emissions and projects tab, you will be able to see there is a homeworking category. So looking at that, you will be able to see the exact emissions factor and what data we have reported on based on the results of the survey. Similarly, if you were to look at the scope 3 additional data we have reported on, you will be able to see that specific emissions factor and the data we have reported on. So the differences showed on there. And again, it is worth clarifying, this is the data we have reported on is the result of the survey. So it's based on how many sort of colleagues told us to travel to and from work, and how often they do that, what mode of transport they use to do that, if they work from home, and so on.
Thanks.
And if I may come in, my understanding, Irene, is that in terms of the 30% of overall staff, a good chunk of them were actually from education and children's services. So there might be, a lot of people who are based in a school and therefore not home working as well. So I think that, sort of paragraph 4.7 is an extrapolation of the information that we've got to the best of our ability. So there is, sort of more work that we need to do to really understand that. But what we were trying to do is meet with the request that we got at committee last year.
Thank you. Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you. Can you remind me what the percentage of the total footprint for the whole of Perth and Kinross is the council footprint?
So the council accounts to approximately 2.9% of the overall Perth and Kinross area emissions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Illingworth. Councillor Welsh.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Page 61, table 2. The scope 2 emissions, which are from the generation of purchased electricity, seem to have plateaued approximately since 2018-19. Yet grid electricity continues to be decarbonised. This area is subject to procurement, and I'm just after a sort of comment as to how we can ensure that we procure effectively to meet our challenging targets for decarbonisation, and what sort of scope that we have in the future to make bigger strides in that particular scope too. Other local authorities, for example, are looking at, for example, construction of solar farms, and organisations like Amazon, etc., can actually buy directly. So it's just to understand how we're going to start to really get that one to move. Thank you.
If I may come in, so obviously in terms of our procurement approach, then we're very keen to make sure that our contracts are as green as we can make them and as sustainable as we can make them. And that is still a work in progress, Councillor Welsh, but it's one that our procurement team and our property team are taking very seriously.
Thank you. The the group has significant ambition and the council has significant ambition. It's really important that procurement doesn't end up frustrating those efforts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Welsh. If there are no further questions, I can find the right bit of my paper, I'll move the report. This report seeks our approval of the annual Public Bodies Climate Change Duties reporting, what a mouthful, for Perth and Kinross Council. We have a duty to report, as Rainey said, on the Council's own carbon emissions to the Scottish Government annually, and the submission of this report fulfils the duty. It's very important that the contents of this report are taken into consideration as they can illustrate the Council's performance to date in relation to reducing its emissions. A very substantial amount of work and resources have been committed to reduce the Council's carbon footprint. However, the emissions reduction trend needs to be significantly accelerated to ensure that we do achieve the Council's climate objectives in accordance with the Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan, and everyone can help us to do that. As part of the approval of last year's report, the committee requested a robust Scope 3 reporting methodology by November 2023, and although still to be validated by further surveys and work, we've now included the results of the staff travel and home working survey that we've been discussing, and that contributes to a more accurate calculation of our Council's Scope 3 emissions. We're now improving these calculations further by analysing the Council's procurement and finance spend data, and a briefing note with the results of this analysis will be circulated to members once they've been finalised. Furthermore, an action to develop a plan for addressing areas of high carbon within PKC's purchased goods and services will also be included in the Climate Change Action Plan. We'll continue to provide information about our emissions so we can measure our progress, and we'll encourage our residents, businesses, communities and stakeholders to do the same. I'm happy to accept the recommendations within the report, and I move the paper for approval, and I'd like to ask Councillor Richard Waters to second the report, please.
Thank you. I'm more than happy to formally second this report.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. If members have any comments on the report, I see a comment from Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Vice Convener. I was actually going to read out the title in 4.1 of this, but I think you've already referenced that it is quite a mouthful, and it does concern me that, again, this is a report we've got to make to the Scottish Government, and as Councillor Illingworth outlined, we only actually are responsible for 2.9% of Perth and Kinross Council's emissions, so it seems an awful lot of work for a very small amount of emissions, but thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Does anyone else have any comments? Councillor Lang?
Thanks. So few. It was such a short comment I hadn't typed in, but it's just to respond to that. 2.9%. May not sound a lot, but where do we start? We should be showing the way forward and not just throwing our hands up in the air and say, well, we can make no difference. Who can make any difference? We'll just continue to see more floods. We'll just continue to see everything. We'll just can move on the way that we can't sustainably move forward. We're meant to be looking after the planet, the climate, etc., for people who are here in 200 years' time, hopefully. Not such short-sightedness as to say, oh, it's going to be too much work, so we'd be as well not bothered. I find that a ridiculous statement, and I welcome this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ling. If there are no further comments, can I ask that we agree the recommendations in the report? Oops, thank you all. I've passed back to the convener.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Item 6 on today's agenda, Local Heat and Energy Efficiency Strategy 2024 to 2045. Can I ask Serge to introduce the report? Serge.
Good morning, Councillor. Thank you, Convener. This report seeks approval of the first Local Heat and Energy Efficiency Strategy 2024-2045 and Delivery Plan 2024-2029 for Perth and Kinross. And this is to meet the requirements of the legislation and Scottish Government guidance. It's also for approval for the submission to the Scottish Government and their publication. Perth and Kinross Council has a statutory duty to prepare a local heat and energy efficiency strategy. and updated on a 5-year basis as part of the Local Heat Energy Efficiency Strategy Scotland Order 2022. And the Council must publish them on or before the 31st of December 2023. The Local Heat and Energy Efficiency Strategy is a long-term strategic framework for the improvement of the energy efficiency of buildings in the local authorities area and the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions resulting from the heat of such buildings. The strategy is attached in Appendix 1. A delivery plan is the document setting out how the local authority proposes to support implementation of this strategy, and the delivery plan is attached in Appendix 2. Both have been developed using an evidence-based approach and through an ongoing engagement with stakeholders and communities. The report provides a summary of the strategy and delivery plan. Both provides details of vision, outcomes, strategic priorities, and delivery priorities and focused actions. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Serge. Do we have any questions? Councillor Forbes?
Thanks, Convener. Serge, I apologise. I should have sent you this question in advance, but I have to confess that I only studied these papers in detail last night and it was just too late. And I have to confess, I'm completely bamboozled by it. Can you give me a kind of entry level as to what this is actually going to mean in real life for real people on the ground?
Yeah, we could try to summarize what the paper is all about. Is in the title, effectively. It's a heat and energy efficiency strategy. So it's really focusing on how can we decarbonize our heat for our buildings, domestic and non-domestic buildings, and also how we can improve energy efficiency for these buildings through measures to make them better insulated, so reducing heat loss effectively. So the strategy is effectively trying to have a direction of how we can address the issues that we have highlighted through the evidence that we've collected, and in the strategy you will see there's a kind of a baseline of what our domestic buildings are how they're performing now. So the houses in terms of improve the energy efficiency, that they are the standards of the energy efficiency. It's the same for the non-domestic, so the offices and industrial properties. So you've got the baseline there, and the idea is to say, well, how can we effectively move from that baseline and improve the baseline to make effectively a difference? So for people in their house, it's effectively to have more affordable warmth. So effectively they can afford the heating in their house. They can obviously have a better building to live in. It will be more comfortable, so they will potentially have a better air quality in their building. And overall, it's obviously to try to reduce carbon emissions from the buildings in Perth and Kinross.
Thank you, Serge. You want to come back? Yeah, please do.
Thanks, Convener. And there are government targets we've got to meet, so presumably some of this will be driven by specific actions or outcomes on specific dates over the next 5 years. Is that the case?
That's correct, yes. So they are the overall target of being net zero by 2045. That's the overall kind of, but within that there are specific targets which are detailed in the strategy about the targets that domestic buildings will have to meet by certain dates. So for instance, in some domestic buildings, the energy efficient, the energy performance certificates, the famous APC, A, B, C, D. So there's targets for a certain type of buildings to reach, and maybe C, for instance, by such date and so on. And there are specific targets as well for social housing. So they're all listed in the strategy. So that strategy will aim effectively to try to meet these statutory targets.
Thank you. Thank you, Serge. Councillor Illingworth.
Me, my little subject of phosphorus. I just say hydrogen's got a minor mention in this report in front of us. Hydrogen in 5 years' time, it'll probably fill the pages of this report. It's going to be a major future source of energy. And I say, when I was speaking about transport and bus in the rural areas, just the buses, I want to see pissing water out their back ends rather than fumes from electric motors, batteries corroding, blowing up, whatever. That's what I want to see in the future. A major employer in this area is converting shortly most of his trucks onto hydrogen and generating hydrogen himself.
Sorry,
I
Councillor
feel it's
Anderson, a question. There is a question in here.
well, I feel it's been not highlighted as such as an important. Just get a few mentions, a few lines, comments, and I'm disappointed in it.
I think that was a comment, but thank you. Do we have any further questions? Councillor Forbes.
Sorry, convener, kind of caught me on the hop there. I wasn't quite prepared for it. There's reference to, I think you did already mention the Serge, and it's the EPC ratings for different types of properties. Can you just remind me, we're as Perth Kinross, we're a social landlord, and we have to reach a certain target by a certain date. Can you remind me what that is? I know it's in there and I just can't quite find it at the moment.
Yes, it's summarized in the table in the report, but the regulatory targets for energy efficiency are by 2026, all social housing APC D should go to APC B by 2032. No, sorry, by 2026, all social housing should be APC CD, and by 2032, there should be APC B. So there's a movement from between 2026, 2032 in 6 years with the activity we should move from APC D to APC B. For the private rented sector, by 2028, all housing should be APC C. And by 2033, all homes will have the equivalent of APCC.
Please, if it's on the same.
Thank you, Serge, and I apologise. I kind of caught in the hop and I can't quite find it again, but I know in here somewhere I saw an approximate cost per house to meet those targets, and I'm sure you'll know this report intimately. Can you just remind us what that is? Sorry, I can't find it at the moment.
Sorry, I don't have the cost specifically, but the cost have been calculated using a modeling, a model effectively, would tell us effectively based on the type of houses that we have and the energy efficiency that they have, how much it will cost to move them from one standard to another. I need to find out exactly what will be the cost, and I can communicate that later. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Welch.
Thank you, convener. I do recall seeing the report, but I can't find it just at this particular moment, that in terms of developing projects in due course that may become shovel-ready, in terms of sort of timeline and narrowing down those areas that we want to sort of further develop so that we can actually specify and create projects that may become available for Scottish Government support and funding. How far away are we from that in terms of timeline? Thank you.
So the strategy is obviously putting the strategy objectives over 20 years, but the delivery plan is a 5-year delivery plan. And within that, there are specific actions effectively to identify how we can effectively progress and develop business cases for specific projects and start to create a program of projects. So we've started already. And in the strategy, you will see that in the first objective, which is about decarbonization, EAT networks are effectively, there's a focus on EAT networks, and particularly in Perth City, but also in other areas. So I think that in terms of timescale over the next year, maybe in the next 6 months, we will be able to have a start of a program of a timeline, maybe using the EAT networks as a core first step. And effectively try to build up around that a program and a series of projects, which will start that pipeline of projects. But we've got the tools in place because we've developed a decision-making tool, which is effectively taking all the data that we have produced for the strategy and try to use that data as evidence-based to start a strategic outline case for specific project, and by doing that for different projects, we start to develop that pipeline of project. What's important there is obviously identifying the project, but also how this project can be taken forward, particularly from a resources point of view, and the capacity and expertise we need to take them, forward. That's why there's one action here is about the creation of a strategic energy partnership. Effectively, is to explore that, is to see how we can work with the private sector to find and work with the expertise and potentially private investment to take forward these projects in the long term. But in terms of timescale, really in the next 6 to 12 months, that will be the focus of the actions.
Thank you, Serge. Do we have any further questions? Thank you. I will move to the report. This report seeks our approval for the first local heat and energy efficiency strategy 24 to 45 and delivery plan 24 to 29 for Perth and Kinross. We have a duty to prepare the LHEAS and delivery plan that will be filled within this report. I'm glad to say that we will be one of the first local authorities in Scotland to do so. We know that there will be constraints in delivering this, and the targets set will be challenging to meet. And as new technologies evolve, this will require us to find new ways of working. Resourcing these ambitions within the challenging finances of the Council will add another complexity. The LHEAS is a key document to provide our residents, businesses, communities, stakeholders, and the Council with a direction of travel, a route map to decarbonise our heating and improve buildings' energy efficiency. It is a way to channel our collective energy and prioritise our actions with the greatest impact, not only for the environment, but also for our economy and society, and can play a key role in addressing the high levels of fuel poverty within Perth and Kinross area. As part of the LHEAS, we will be taking a whole energy systems approach, which is going beyond the heat and energy to include areas such as transport, energy production and storage, and also includes the integration of our Council's buildings decarbonisation programme. Opportunities will also arise to develop green skills and a local supply chain to work in partnership with communities to build community wealth and to mobilise partners in public and private investment are all fully recognised and will be key supporting mechanisms to deliver our vision. I would like to recognise the commitment and dedication of all who have participated in the development of this first LHEAS, showing a commitment to work with our residents, our businesses, our communities and stakeholders to ensure its successful delivery. I am happy to accept the recommendations within the report and move the paper for approval. Can I ask Councillor Liz Barrett to second the report?
Happy to second the report formally. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Do members have any comments on the report? And I see Councillor Forbes, you're first. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. This is a really complex and quite honestly difficult for me anyway to understand issue, and I completely accept the fact I probably should have started reading the papers in detail earlier than last night, but I do wonder if something as complex as comes along again, we should maybe have a workshop or something where we could sort of open.
Sorry to interrupt here, Councillor Forbes, but we did have a workshop, and it was very helpful, I think. But,
I had
no
a feeling
that
when I said that you were going to come back and tell me that. I apologise. I was obviously on holiday at that point, but I found the page I was looking for, Serge, and it does give costs, but it doesn't give costs for social landlords. It gives costs for private rental sector and for owner occupiers. So I apologise for leading you off down a track that didn't actually exist. I'm delighted to see that the Scottish Government are going to try and find £33 billion to do this, and I wish them very good luck with doing so, because I can't see that happening. And it does reference here specifically the private landlord sectors are choosing to sell rather than upgrade, and at a cost of 17,000 per property. As a private landlord myself, I completely understand that, and quite frankly, I will probably make a decision very soon to remove myself from that market, certainly in Scotland. Thank you.
Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you, convener. We're going, according to this report, we're going to need an awful lot more electricity generation in this country. And a day like yesterday, when 50% of energy, electrical energy created in the UK is from fossil fuels, it does seem short-sighted for the Scottish Government to insist that there be no nuclear generation in Scotland.
Councillor Lane.
Thanks. It was really just to say I welcome this report, and the workshop was well worth attending, and if you attended that you would get a feel for it. I do agree with Councillor Forbes, there's a lot to take in here, but it's setting a strategy forward, and yeah, I couldn't read it all in one go either. It would take just a few days to go backwards and forwards on it. But it was to answer Councillor Anderson's point. I was kind of shocked with the language he used, but that's his choice, and it wasn't picked up on it. But this is about heating homes and buildings, etc. It's nothing to do with public transport. So I think if you read the page 40 on the hydrogen part of it, it explains that the UK government will take decisions on the role of hydrogen in the UK gas network in 2026. So there's not a lot to speak about hydrogen in this report, apart from saying that. If it was a report on transport and whether the buses would be emitting water from their exhaust moving forward, that would be a totally different paper. Thank you.
Councillor Welch, you have a comment.
Thank you, convener. Councillor Ling's actually answered or raised some of what I was going to say, but that's essentially spot on. This is about heating buildings, buildings that generally operate around 19 to 21 degrees C. Why we should burn hydrogen at 500 degrees C to heat a building at 21 degrees C, releasing significant amounts of nitrogen oxides in that urban city environment. This just does not make sense. There's some great information on this, which I'm happy to help and share with Councillor Anderson, just so that we've got clarity in the direction of travel. But I absolutely welcome the local heat and building strategy report. This is very much around how we inform and make decisions for significant investments, both as individual house owners and as communities and as local authorities and government, to ensure that we make no regrets investment and create business cases that actually innovate and provide opportunities and provide long-term committed jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McKeown.
Yeah, thank you, convener. As a council with our own housing stock, we are doing very well meeting our heating and our housing standards. I think the standards recently were redrafted by the Scottish Government, which actually changed our figures from the sort of 90% to 70% of our current stock meeting the current requirements. The tenants themselves are the ones who pay for the upgrades of the council stock through the housing revenue account, and I think it's hoped in the future that the private renting sector would be able to do the same. If not, I see a big hit on the house price value if people are trying to sell houses that don't meet the appropriate electricity and emission standards. So it's very important. I don't think 33 billion is coming down the line. I think I can agree with councillors on that. But I also don't think getting France to build nuclear power stations and then selling us electricity at a tariff that we don't know is a way forward in the future. And I think that time will tell that the wind and tidal energy that's available to Scotland will provide it with electricity that will meet Scotland's needs as an independent country.
Thank you. Is there any further comments on the report? If there's no amendment, can we agree the recommendations in the report? Thank you. Just going to just had a request for a small comfort break, and so if we can just have a 10 minutes enough, or come back. If we come back at 11 o'clock on the dot, that gives 12 minutes. Thank you. Get started again. Just a quick comment on the use of language within this committee. This is a public committee that has been recorded, and the language we use should represent our position within this council. So can I please ask people just to be aware of the type of language you're using as we finish off the last two papers, and I'm going to pass over to Councillor Liz Barrett for the next paper.
Thank you, Convener. The next paper is Craigieburn Flood Study, a subject very close to my heart. And I'd like to ask Peter Dixon to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Vice Convener. This report describes the Council's flood protection study for the Craigieburn in Perth. There's been a history of flooding in this area of the city, most recently in October 2023, and areas of the community remain at risk of flooding. The Tay Flood Risk Management Plan was published in June 2016. This set out the arrangements for various flood studies as a means of further improving our understanding of flood risk in certain locations. The Council's sixth highest priority flood study was identified to consider flooding on the Craigieburn. And an integrated catchment flood study was also set up for Perth to improve understanding of the risk of flooding from sewers, surface water and watercourses. Now the report to committee today recommends that a small flood protection scheme is taken forward at Queen's Avenue on the Craigieburn as it's deemed to be economically viable using industry standard assessment criteria. The preliminary proposals consist of upgrading an existing culvert and channel modifications to reduce the risk of flooding from the Craigieburn in Perth. Unfortunately, we'll not be able to completely, it's not possible to completely remove the risk of flooding across this catchment. The consultant engineer's report has demonstrated that a number of other potential actions are not viable, and hence no further work is proposed to be undertaken on their development. The study has confirmed that the benefit cost ratios for the shortlisted actions are generally quite low, and this is partly due to the presence of existing flood defences within the catchment, which form part of the Perth flood scheme, and also the ongoing maintenance that the council currently undertakes. Some degree of flood risk will always remain, even if it were possible to implement all of the assessed options. And even if it was possible to remove all of the risk of flooding from the burn, the risk of surface water and sewer flooding would still remain. And the nature of the catchment also means that there is limited scope for more extensive options. However, we are continuing to work on the development of the Perth Surface Water Management Plan, which is continuing and is considering potential proposals to manage the risk of surface water flooding across Perth, including within the Craigieburn catchment. In the meantime, flood risk will continue to be managed as set out in our published flood risk management plans. We've held public engagement events on the studies were arranged on the 20th and 28th of June to disseminate the findings of the study. In addition, the committee reports notes that the proposed flood scheme at Queen's Avenue will be submitted to SEPA for national prioritisation and inclusion in the next Tay Flood Risk Management Plan and local flood risk management plan covering the period from 2028 to 2034. It's acknowledged that this seems a long time away, but it should be noted that the legislation around this requires a plan-led, evidence-based and risk-based approach to flooding. The proposals for the recommended flood scheme at Queen's Avenue, Perth, are still to also be developed through a process of further investigations, consultation, design, the statutory process, detailed design and tendering before construction can take place. The next local flood risk management plan should set out the proposed implementation arrangements for the flood scheme, including timescales and how it will be funded. However, due to the ongoing Scottish Government causal review of capital funding for flood schemes and a number of other schemes that the Council is already progressing, the timescales and funding arrangements for the scheme of the Craigieburn remain unclear for the time being. The next phase of work to develop the flood scheme proposals will therefore not commence until the funding review provides further clarity around capital grant funding and provision is made within the Council's capital programme. In the meantime, individuals, businesses and communities must play a critical role in making themselves more resilient and helping to reduce the impact of flooding. The Tay Local Flood Risk Management Plan therefore includes actions which are intended to enable this and to allow communities to act and become more resilient to flooding. The flood study has also confirmed that property flood resilience measures are an effective way for residents and communities to improve their resilience to flooding, and recommends that those in flood affected areas continue or consider installing these. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. I see we have questions already from Councillor Forbes and Councillor Kogali and an amendment from Councillor Lang. I propose that we'll take questions, I'll move the report and then we'll deal with the amendment, and Adam will keep me right if I've got that wrong. Thank you. Councillor Forbes, your question, please.
Thanks, Vice Convener. I was going to suggest we should maybe hear the amendment first, given that it's an amendment from the administration. It's likely to pass and it may put all our questions completely out the window. But if you're happy to carry on with the procedure, that's absolutely fine. Peter, I see we're only able to do a little bit of this, and I did read something in the papers the other day that the residents who are not in the bit that we're going to do are understandably unhappy, and it's all to do with cost-benefit ratio, which I believe is at 1. I think I understand that. Who sets the? Can I just ask 2 questions because they're kind of linked? And yeah, so who sets the cost-benefit ratio would be my first question, and my second question is, I see we'll get up to 80% grant assistance for this. That's, I presume, from the Scottish Government. And in your experience, I know you can't give me a specific answer. In your experience, are we likely to get the full 80%?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Forbes. The cost-benefit ratios are derived by our consultant engineers who've done the study. So they work out the there's 2 sides. There's damages and benefits. So we work out the flood damages that comes through the modelling that we work out. And there's national guidance which tells us the sort of level of damages that we can accrue from different types of buildings and infrastructure. So that's all calculated, and that's purely a function of flood risk and the number of floods that we get over a long appraisal period. Normally they work this out over a 100-year period. So that's the damages. The benefits come from putting flood defences in or doing some sort of action that reduces or eliminates that damage. You can then accrue a benefit from that, and the costs are then just purely associated with whatever it is we're trying to do. If it is building flood defences, then we can work out the cost of doing that over time. So that's the capital cost of building, whether it's flood storage measures or flood walls or flood embankments, whatever it might be, and then the cost of designing that, constructing it, and then maintaining it over that long appraisal period as well. So it's the costs and the benefits, which is the damages avoided over time. And the general rule is that you can't really spend more on building your flood defences than you would avoid in terms of flood damages. You always have to have more, which gives you a cost-benefit ratio of more than 1. And we tend to find that when we do these studies, this is at a feasibility stage. As we move forward through design and we do a bit more work on it, and we have the kind of inflationary pressures that we've seen in the economy the last few years, costs go up inevitably, so the cost-benefit ratios tend to go down. So if we're starting at quite a low point at this point, we tend to realise that that if a cost-benefit ratio is just over 1 over the course of time, and greater investigations, it probably will drop below 1. So you do tend to have reasonable cost-benefit ratios and a reasonably robust economic appraisal in there to give you confidence that it is actually going to happen. So what was the second part of your question again? Apologies.
No, that's okay. If you don't mind, Convener, can I come with a follow-up on that and then just remind them what my... Okay. Peter, who determines that the cost-benefit ratio should be 1? Is that a decision taken by us, or is it taken by someone else and we have to work to that, or is it just industry standard?
It's national guidance, really, yeah, based on that. It's based on the national guidance that's provided and also adopted by the Environment Agency down south, Scottish Government up in Scotland.
Okay, thanks. Just a reminder, my second question was about the 80%, and you can't give me a definite answer. I know this, but in your experience, are we likely to get the full 80% based on previous flood schemes?
The 80% still in place. I believe that the problem at the moment is there's so many flood schemes across Scotland, and the available capital budget is limited. So there's a bit of an exercise, a bit of a review ongoing to look at what schemes, get the money first. Again, it's a bit of a prioritisation exercise because there's a limited pot of money. So I think the 80% is holding, but you might have to wait to get it, and that's the problem at the moment. The timescales around this are very uncertain. We're still waiting for the Scottish Government COSO to review to finalise, and it'll take a while yet, I think. So there isn't a lot of clarity around that at the moment, unfortunately.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Kigali.
My question kind of almost piggybacks on Councillor Forbes' first one, and it's about how we measure the actual damage caused by flooding. Do we only measure the impact on buildings, or do we go beyond that and go, look, these families have had to move potentially out of their homes, or there's been damage to their actual goods beyond that is just flood damage to the building, because that feels like something that if you're looking purely at stats and you don't look at the huge impact that we've seen flooding recently people have experienced, that is something that is worthwhile including in that measure, I think.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's perhaps didn't explain it very well. It's much wider than just the building losses. It's a whole range of direct and indirect losses. It will include direct damages to buildings and businesses and infrastructure, but a lot of indirect losses as well, things like road closures and all of these kind of things. So it takes into account the type of building you're dealing with and also the contents of the building. But I have to say it is an economic appraisal, it's not a financial appraisal. So people obviously have their individual impacts that they've unfortunately suffered as part of a flood. So that, white goods, for instance, or their personal belongings. So we don't go to every property and calculate the financial losses. It is an economic assessment. So a lot of the information comes from standard information that is published in national guidance, for instance. And that is, it comes from Middlesex University. So it's well established and used across the UK and is updated regularly. So it does take account of a lot of different types of indirect and direct losses.
Thank you, Noah, and thank you, Peter. Can I go? I have a question from Councillor Waters, so I'll go to him first and then come back to you, Councillor Forbes. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Waters.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Just on page 210 of the report and 4.28, and you mentioned it in your introduction, the Perth Surface Water Management Plan. This obviously, contributes quite a lot to flooding in the area, but can you give a wee bit more information that, what's happening with that and what the expected timescales are for delivering the plan part of it?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Waters. Yeah, it's quite a big study because the modelling work that's been developed. I mean, this is all. It's quite new. It's kind of state of the art, the kind of modelling what's been done now. So we've been working with Scottish Water to do the earlier part of this, which was the Perth Integrated Catchment Study. So there was a city-wide model developed, and this is looking at integrated forms of flooding. So between your combined sewers, surface water drainage, small water courses, tidal influences, it's all of that taken into account, and it looked at the flood risk for that right across the whole city. So that was kind of completed around about 2019, and using that model now, we're now working on the Perth Surface Water Management Plan. So that's, again, looking right across the city, looking at the areas of highest flood risk in the city, and then what potentially can be done to manage or potentially reduce that risk of flooding. So we will be looking in those hot spots, and it is places like, round about the Craigieburn catchment, Marshall Place, these kind of areas, Fuse Road, all the places we unfortunately know are flooding hotspots. They'll be looked at using this quite extensive modelling exercise. They'll look at what potential actions we can put in place to manage those, and then again we'll do this cost benefit exercise. So that's ongoing at the moment. It is quite a big exercise. It's a big model The consultants have had a few problems with it. It's the same consultants we've got working on this who did the Craigieburn flood study, which is good in terms of coordinating the two exercises. But I think in terms of getting the work done, the consultants kind of focused a little bit around Craigieburn first, and now they've dropped onto the surface water management plan. So that will continue probably in the springtime now. I think we're aiming at March next year for getting that completed. And there will be, again, as we've done for the Craigieburn flood study, there'll be, you know, sort of community drop-in sessions held with residents in those hotspot areas to talk about flooding and explain the study and explain, you know, what will be getting put forward as part of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Councillor Anderson.
My apologies for earlier language. I'll correct that now, and won't go into base on that. It's really just whether this is a question, either a comment or an amendment as such. I was just looking at 2.6 question. Can I change a word in that statement 2.6 on the second last line when it's commenting on the Amity Burn and Scone has been paused, while the scheme may still progress in future? I'd rather change the may to will. That's all I'm asking. So it's not killing it off for umpteen years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. I understand, I think Mr Dixon will confirm that it is a may rather than a will, given where we are at the moment. Is that right?
It's actually in the published flood risk management plan, so I take Councillor Anderson's point, and maybe it should be a will. The problem at the moment is the funding around it. It's one of the schemes that unfortunately it's kind of been paused by the Scottish Government because of the funding review, so it isn't moving forward at present. But yeah, the intention is certainly, because it is in a published flood risk management plan, is to take it forward in the future.
Thank you, Mr Dixon. Next is Councillor Cogali.
Hi, my question's been answered.
Thank you, Councillor Cogali. Councillor Illingworth, question of your own.
Thank you. Mr Dixon, you said that inflation would increase the costs in terms of the cost-benefit analysis. Won't also inflation increase the benefits? So it should balance out and the CB ratio remain the same?
We would certainly hope so. I think there's been a little bit of what we're detecting a little bit is a bit of lag coming through the system, that the costs are immediate to us, you know, for tendering for work or whatever. Contractors are quite happy to tell us costs have gone up, but the lag is maybe coming a little bit through the national guidance and the research showing, as you just alluded to, the benefit side, the damages to buildings, etc., the cost of refitting buildings and businesses, you know, should be going up at a similar amount. So yeah, we would certainly expect to see that, but it's just not quite come through in the guidance yet. But I think it will come through soon.
Thank you. And another question from Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Peter, I'm going to ask about if things change, and it's not about the money, but you know, this could take years to come to fruition, and we see an ever-changing climate, increased flooding. What would be the reaction if the situation on the ground, as in the flooding, changed substantially between now and when the scheme comes into play? Would you have to redesign it, and would we have to go back around the cycle again?
I think we would kind of revisit this anyway. We would come to pick up the scheme and to develop an outline design. We always look at the hydrology. It might have been done a few years previously. We would always update it at that point, and try and bring things up to date and look at the latest climate change information, etc., and review it and bring it up to date at that point before embarking on the sort of permanent design for that. So it really just is a process of trying to keep up to date and keep things under review, and bring them get them as up to date as possible as we can before we, you know, commit to a final design and construction drawings.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, I will move the report and then ask Councillor Ling to present his amendment. As Mr Dixon has outlined, Scotland has a national approach to managing the risk of flooding, and to better plan and coordinate on this, the Council is working closely with other public bodies to implement national and local plans. This flood study is one of the latest outputs from the ongoing process, setting out how flooding will be tackled in the future and how we'll reduce the impact of our unpredictable weather. Implementing the small flood scheme on Queen's Avenue in Perth will significantly reduce the flood risk to the local community there, but this will take time due to the significant number of other flood schemes identified to date and the work required to undertake the necessary design and construction work and the current limitations in capital funding. No works are proposed for the other areas of the Craigieburn catchment in Perth just now. However, the Council's flooding team does continue to work with our consulting engineers to develop the Perth Surface Water Management Plan. We've certainly got things with long names today. The flood studies improved knowledge of flooding in this area, and the risk of ongoing flooding will continue to be managed via other actions in the Council's flood risk management plans, including through community flood resilience. The findings from the study, as Peter said, have been discussed with the community at local community drop-in sessions and made available via the Council's consultation hub, and a question and answer document will be issued in response to these responses. That will be issued quite soon. Thank you. Can I ask Councillor Ling to please move his amendment? Sorry, Councillor Waters, please would you second the motion?
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Happy to formally second it.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Ling.
Thanks, Vice Convener. I would like to, this was an officer's paper and we discussed this at pre-agenda, but the officers obviously can't comment on this is a political for the whole of the committee to decide. Is I would like to add a recommendation, and hopefully you'll accept it, in that recommend that we ask officers to investigate the potential for this project to become part of the budget process and to report back to this committee in January if there is a way, and also if there's a funding solution that we can decide this to bring this forward more timely than waiting 10 years. I can say on record that the flood schemes we've had up till now that have been completed, we've received 80% funding from the Scottish Government, but where we'll be in 10 years, nobody knows. And for this sum, there may be savings in actually our workforce going out and doing work on Craigieburn every time there's a lot of water that may find a funding solution if we can borrow some capital. So basically, I'm asking for officers to investigate the potential for this project to become part of the budget process and to report back to this committee in January, so that all groups can look at if they wish to incorporate this in the capital budget. The project's already been proven to be valuable. It's 1.42, I think, is the ratio, with the lower limit being 1. So it's nearly 1.5 times what's required. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ling. I'm happy to second that amendment, and I would hope that everybody will accept that we take this in. I've been out in Perth City South through all the flooding events since before I was a councillor, and it's not just about the loss of property, it's also about the distress and fear and worry that's caused to residents every time there's heavy rain forecast or prolonged rain forecast. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all the community resilience groups across Perth and Kinross who've been doing great work supporting each other, and especially I welcome the setting up of the new Perth Community Flood Aid group on Saturday. I know it's very frustrating for residents that there are such long timescales. The council just can't get on with it, although we know there are things that would help with the effects of flooding where there's benefit to our residents in doing that. I know they're disappointed that the approach seems to be piecemeal, and that the criteria seem to limit the way that potential solutions can be counted and the benefits can be counted. So I would urge you all to support the report as amended, and I'd ask Councillor Waters just to agree that he can accept this. Sorry, point of clarification, Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, can we have some text for the amendment so we actually know what we're signing up to here? And I wonder if, in the spirit of generosity, the scheme that Councillor Anderson just identified, could that be rolled into this proposal as well?
Sorry, I've just had it pointed out that I can't second the amendment because so I think you can accept it. I can accept the amendment into the motion, so that's what we're doing, and Councillor Waters is happy with that. Sorry, it was just to do the procedural thing because this is quite new to me. Regarding including other schemes in this approach, I think, can I go back to Councillor Ling on that?
This report is specifically on the Craigieburn flood scheme, and it's specific to this paper that I'm referring to. But not in the detail that this one is discussed in. So the amendments goes for this, the Craigieburn flood study, and happy to look at others moving forward.
Just hang on a minute, we'll see what we can do about that. In the report, that to ask officers to investigate whether there's potential for the council to fund this through the budget process and to report back to this committee in January 2024. Is that correct, Councillor Ling?
Yes, thanks.
And can I just add for complete clarity that that is the recommendation within the report in terms of the option. It's not for the entirety of any scheme, it's just for the option as identified in the report.
Yes.
So can we agree the recommendations as amended in the report, please? Further point of clarification from Councillor Forbes. Councillor Illingworth.
I'm just very slightly concerned that we're promoting one project above all the other projects across the Perth and Kinross, or we seem to be promoting one project above all the other projects in the Perth and Kinross flood risk management strategy for the whole council area. And I just wondered if officers have any opinions on whether this would mean effectively rewriting the whole strategy.
All I'm asking is that this be brought back and then can be considered by all groups. Nobody has to support it if they don't, but I'm asking for this project that the paper is primarily about be brought back. It's 340,000 or 314,000 pounds worth for this, and that's what the amendment's for. It's not making a decision of prioritising anything. It's asking for some detail to come back.
And we would cover that in the report coming back.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Vice Convener. I don't really have an issue with what Councillor Ling is proposing. I mean, I think we can support that. I'm slightly surprised, I have to say, that the administration are amending an administration paper. It's kind of been thrown upon us. I would make one request, if I may, whether this is possible. I think we could probably get behind this. The wording that Councillor Anderson referred to about the flood scheme in his ward, which Peter has already accepted, should say will rather than may. Would we be happy to change that word? And then I think we could probably all get behind this and move on. Thanks.
Could I just back on that? There's an officer's paper. It was raised at pre-agenda. It was not acted on because it was an officer's paper. They did not want to put this in as a recommendation. It wasn't an administration paper. This is a fully operational matter and a paper brought forward by the flood team. So that's why I'm having to use this as having an added recommendation, because it's a political decision that we can all make.
Okay. If we can, I think Mr. Dixon has confirmed that we can change may to will on the Anity Byrne reference in the paper. If Mr. Dixon could just confirm, please.
Yeah, thanks, Vice Convener. Yes, I think it's probably fine. As I said, the Anity Byrne flood protection scheme is in a published flood risk management plan, so there's a commitment there to doing that. And the problem at the moment is obviously funding and resources around that.
Thank you. So can we now agree the paper as amended? Thank you. And I would pass back to Councillor Waters.
Thank you very much for that.
Sorry, forgot that bit. Oh dear, sorry about this. Very poor cheering this morning. Do members have comments on the report? Oh, I see a comment from Councillor Forbes.
Thanks. So don't worry about it. I understand these things come at you from left field. I'm completely understand where Councillor Ling's coming from. I understand what he's trying to do. It was a bit of a surprise to me. It was clearly a bit of a surprise to you as well. I'm glad we found a solution to this that everybody's happy with and everybody can get behind. I do have to say I share Councillor Illingworth's slight concerns that this might send out a message that we, as a council, are looking at one scheme over others. And I am genuinely concerned about that. We had very emotive comments from people at the Scrutiny Committee last week, and I think we just need to be really mindful that flooding affects everybody and people are very, very concerned about it. And I hope that I understand Councillor Lang's point, and I just slightly concerned we're putting one scheme ahead of the other, but I'm comfortable to go ahead with the decision we've made. Thanks.
Thank you. And a comment from Councillor Lang. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the committee for agreeing that unanimously. I think it is the right thing to do, to look at things sometimes on a case-by-case basis and make a decision. You wouldn't see me proposing that we try to fund 28 to 33 million for the Comrie flood scheme. I think we need 80% to do that, but on others, I think we'll have to take a common sense view and look at ways of funding them. And yes, that's why Finance and Resources we committed £175,000 to help people across Perth and Kinross be able to help themselves by forming resilience groups, etc. And that's why I understand how emotive a subject it is, and that was why there was 175,000 put into the resilience budget last Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Can we now agree the recommendations in the report? Thank you all. Peter?
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Our final paper this afternoon is item 8, South Kinross Flood Protection Scheme. And can I go back to Peter Dixon to introduce this report? Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Onto the second paper, this report provides an update on the progress of the Kinross flood protection scheme and proposes that the committee approves the recommended scheme outline design. The proposals will then be submitted to the necessary statutory process under the Flood Risk Management Scotland Act, and a new deadline of 31st of March 2024 has recently been set for this. Once statutory consent has been secured, the proposals will be developed further using detailed design prior to eventual construction. So the Council's duties with regard to flooding are set out in the Flood Act. The Council published its first local flood risk management plans in June 2016 and followed up with the publication of an interim progress report in March 2019 and a final progress report in December 2022. The second round of local flood risk management plans were also published in December 2022. The provision of a flood protection scheme in South Kinross is included on the national priority list and remains one of the key actions within the published fourth estuary local flood risk management plan. So Kinross itself is located in the River Leven catchment. There are 3 watercourses in this area: the South Quaich, the Gailey Burn and the Clashburn. These all flow into Loch Leven to the east of the town. There's been a history of flooding in the town, most recently in 2020. The Council's consulting engineers have considered a wide range of potential options for managing this flood risk, and these have been set out at Appendix A in the report. A technical, social, environmental and economic appraisal has been undertaken to arrive at the recommended scheme. The scheme includes new flood walls, embankments and culvert improvements, a flood storage area and some property flood resilience measures. The proposed flood defences will be located along the 3 watercourses as set out in Appendix B of the report, and the works will include the associated public utility diversions and landscaping. The outline design of the scheme has been subject of extensive public consultation with the local community. Drop-in sessions were held at the Kinross Parish Church on the 28th of September and the 5th of October this year, and the information was also made available via the Council's consultation hub, and a public consultation report will be issued to the community soon. The current outline design for the proposed scheme requires further development as part of the detailed design process, and statutory consents required to be obtained. Construction is anticipated to commence in 2025 currently, assuming no further delay to the statutory process and the detailed design programme. It's also worth noting that a further deadline has been introduced as part of the capital grant arrangements, and that's to ensure the appointment of a works contractor by 31st of March 2026. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Peter. Do we have any questions on this? Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Convener. Peter, I know it isn't an option that's going to go ahead, but there's reference to the M90 motorway, and I wonder how's our working relationship with whoever controls that? I'm not sure if that's Amy or Bear, but do we work quite closely with them, and do you think we work quite well with them?
Yeah, Transport Scotland, obviously, ultimately, and then I can't remember who the current maintenance contractor is. It will either be Amy or Bear. Yeah, of course, we liaise with both the operating company and Transport Scotland on any matters around the trunk road network. So that's been done on this in the past, Councillor Forbes, yes.
Do you have any further questions? I will move the report. The decision before committee today is essentially about approving the recommended outline design for the flood protection scheme in South Kinross. The outline design will then become the Council's preferred scheme, which can be published under statutory process set out in the Flood Act in time for the deadline of the 31st of March 2024. The outline design of the scheme has been developed and has been the subject of extensive consultation within the community and local businesses. Subject to committee approving the scheme today, the statutory consent being granted under the Flood Act, the Council will then be in a position to complete the detailed design of the scheme, move into procurement phase and commence its destruction. This is very good news for the local community, have been so badly affected by flooding in the past. especially in 2020 when two record-breaking floods, 6 months apart, caused a large amount of damage to homes and businesses in the area. I'm happy to accept the recommendation within the report and move the paper for approval. Can I ask Councillor Liz Barrett to second the report?
Thank you. I'm happy to second the report.
Just any comments on the report, and start off with Councillor Illingworth. Sorry, Councillor Forbes, was your question? No. Councillor Illingworth, comment, please.
Yeah, it's a general comment. The reports from the flood team are generally concise and well written. The reports came to us last Wednesday afternoon, and we've been asked to read 248 pages in 5.5 days, and that makes it really hard to really get to grips with all the papers that have been presented to us today. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Illingworth. As I'm sure you're aware, this committee was moved to later in the month, and it was largely to get the LHEAS report within there, and council's officers have been working hard to ensure they've tried to deliver and meet this, what was quite a tight deadline for them anyway. But it had to kind of come before us at this stage, so apologies that it's a little bit late, but thanks for the engagement. Any further comments? That brings us to an end of this committee. Thank you very much for your participation, and hope you have an enjoyable remainder of your day.